Hey everyone, it's Michael. Today I have a really exciting video for you because I had so much fun starting this book today and reading it and stuff. This is another review for a Give Yourself Goosebumps book. This is my 8th book I think I've read from the Give Yourself series. Anyway, at least it's the 8th that I reviewed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the best, and so far my favorite, Goosebumps Give Yourself Goosebumps book, but easily like in my top 10 Goosebumps books of all time too, because of the content and because of so much in here that I enjoyed. Anyway, this is R.L. Stine's Give Yourself Goosebumps number 17, Little Comic Shop of Horrors. Man, oh man, this was a fantastic Give Yourself Goosebumps book. This is probably, when it comes to creativity levels, as much as I adore and love Escape from Camp Run for Your Life, this might be the best Give Yourself Goosebumps book that exists currently. I just wanted something different. You know, I've been kind of bogged down reading the Monster Blood books. I didn't have the best time ever reading a big chunk of those. They're kind of slow. And then I got around to just kind of missing Give Yourself Goosebumps. I haven't read one of those in probably like 10 videos now on the channel, including my reviews and ranking video and stuff like that. I just wanted something different, and I was like, you know, the Give Yourself series is always a nice, fun return to enjoy something. For anybody who doesn't happen to know, these are basically choose-your-own-adventure books, kind of like those 70s and 80s books, and the Oregon Trail books that currently come out, where you basically will get to a page, and at the bottom of it, you'll have a choice of whether you want to do choice A, of what you want to do next in the story, or choice B. This one, of course, from the title alone, and from the picture alone of Super Lizard, is based around a comic shop of horrors. And I was like, you know, we all know that R.L. Stine is a big fan of comics. There's a clear inspiration from like old Marvel comics in his books. That tone, that feel, that way of telling story. I would say that R.L. Stine is the modern Stan Lee. Even though Goosebumps isn't as popular as it was back in the day, and even though there are rumors too of him not writing all of his stories and whatnot, which is irrelevant in my opinion, I don't care. This is a fantastic book. It is just, everything about this book is so great. I just love it. It's perfect. You couldn't do anything to this to make it better, in my opinion. This has everything from scares to parody to comedy to humor to just fun characters. You know, amazing cameos from monsters that I love and adore. But we'll get more and more into this as I talk about it. This is a really fun book. If you would say that one of your favorite stories ever from Goosebumps is Attack of the Mutant, I'd recommend reading this. Not that this references that in any way, but, you know, Attack of the Mutant, for people who have read it, know how much that's a love letter to comic books and comic book readers and audience members and stuff. But a big feel for the original Marvel-type comics from, like, the early days of Spider-Man, like the 50s and 60s and stuff. Maybe even back to the 40s. It feels a lot like those original, like, old, like, Golden Age comics and Silver Age and stuff. This has that same feeling. This is such a love letter to so many things. You would just expect it to be a comic book thing. It's mainly Marvel, in my opinion. I don't really see a whole lot of reference to things like DC here, but there's a lot of love for Marvel comics here. I mean, you can just tell how much R.L. Stine adores that. And it was just such a fun time. And then there's love for one of my favorite things, one of the things that I hold so dearly, Universal Monsters horror. There's some monsters in here. I'm not going to tell you who, but there may or may not be multiple monsters from the Universal Monster horror days that have great cameos that I enjoyed so much. It's like this book was written for me. I had an amazing time. I could not recommend the book enough to you. You're going to hear me geek out throughout this entire review and just have so much fun talking about it. There is so much great stuff in here, especially the parody aspects of things like Marvel. Man, it is just great. For anybody who doesn't know the story of Little Comic Book Shop of Horrors, or Comic Shop, yeah, it's just Comic Shop, not Comic Book Shop. For anybody who doesn't know the topic of this, basically you are hanging out and you find a comic book shop and you go in there and you have one of two options. You can either kind of go past the weird clerk that has these weird warts on his face. He looks kind of like a familiar person. We don't really know who he is, at least at first. And you can either go to a rack filled with comics and look at that, which will take you on a really fun adventure, or you can go down into the basement to try to look at some more comics that'll take you on more of a scary storyline that I did not expect, because with this awesome cover, I really thought that it was just going to be a straight-up comedy and parody, maybe even, of comic books and comic book love and stuff like that. And I did not expect kind of a creepy tale if you go in the basement area. But I'll kind of break it down piece by piece, because I always like to tell you the two big choices you got, like I just did for these Give Yourself Goosebumps books. So let's talk about if you choose the rack, right? If you choose the rack, basically this almost weird tornado thing happens to you where you get sucked into the comic book, and it turns out there's another kid in here too. If you happen to say the phrase guest shot, then you can transfer from comic book to comic book, different superheroes and stuff, but you'll actually be that superhero or possibly another character in the books themselves. Mainly you start off as a character that's kind of a ripoff of Superman, which I guess that's a DC reference. I didn't even think about that. I'm sorry. Super Duper, or Super Doer, excuse me, not Super Duper. Super Doer is a play on Superman. Has the same kind of powers, very strong, can fly, all that kind of stuff. And there's a person that you happen to know as well that is also stuck in these comics. Apparently there's a lot of kids stuck in these comics. As we read, we find out more and more. But you're kind of learning your powers, and then stuff might happen to take you away from that Super Doer outfit. Then you have some other stuff that happens to you, like you might change into another comic book that might be kind of fun and kind of different. But if you're playing a Super Doer, you'll have stuff like trying to find this mad scientist to try to help you get out of this weird comic book reality. But if you use the guest shot transportation thing too much, you'll become an ink blot and basically just a scrape of ink across a page of comics, like when it rains and you accidentally get the paper itself wet and it just blurs, you know. So you have kind of a threat there, and you have this new ability, whether you're a superhero or not, you still have this new ability to jump from comic to comic. But you could die a horrible death, right? So it's pretty fun. I had a great time with this. One of my favorite things ever parody-wise in anything ever, Goosebumps, anything, it doesn't matter, is the parody of X-Men here. So of course, X-Men are named after Professor X, of course, the fellow who is disabled, and he has psychic abilities and telekinetic abilities, I believe, as well, something like that. But he has a wheelchair and stuff. There is a person in here who is very, very hairy, right? Like almost like a monkey or a gorilla, who is also disabled in like a wheelchair, floaty car type thing. And this person is called Professor Y, right? Like the letter Y, just like Professor X is the letter X, right? His people are called the Wise Guys. I don't know what it is about that. It hit me in just the right way. It was just like, today I was in such a good mood, and I heard that joke, and it hit me just right on the nose, and it just made me laugh, and I adore it already. And I wish we had like t-shirts called the Wise Guys and stuff. That parody of Marvel stuff is so much fun. You have like a parody of Spider-Man in here too. I forgot what it's called, but there's like a small parody of Spider-Man. Like Peter Parker's name is like a joke in here. It was fun. It was a really cool story if you go for the rack storyline and just stay involved in comics and everything. Very satisfying endings. I think if any book out of the Give Yourself Goosebumps books is typical, these are usually really creative and usually really fun, and a lot of choose-your-own-adventure books from many different series don't have the most satisfying endings, especially for in the books that are specifically called choose-your-own-adventure. They kind of just would have really shortcut, just really bland endings, just out of the blue, you know. You think you're making the right choice and you don't. And that happens here too. But in this particular book, I think every single ending here was really satisfying, really creative, really fun, especially in the comic book thing, if you choose the rack storyline. Now, if you go down to the basement, I would say most of those endings are really satisfying as well. Again, you have amazing references. Basically, this basement is like a giant maze, and you can't seem to find your way out. But like I said, there may or may not be some things hanging out down in here that may or may not live down in this maze that are following after you, trying to stalk you. Things happen. You might get stabbed in the arm with like a 2-inch long splinter that you have to, you know, worry about whether these things can smell blood and stuff. Like I said, you have references and actual cameo appearances of Universal monster creatures that I don't want to tell you who it is. But, oh man, it was great. And then there's like an underground group of kids that may or may not be down there. You're trying to find them, if they exist, that is. Kind of depends again on the different choices you make in that storyline. It is such a fun book. I love these Give Yourself Goosebumps game books is what I hear people call them all the time. These are just great. These are really good as a series. I always have fun reading these. These are always enjoyable. Again, whether they're written by R.L. Stine or not, it's irrelevant to me. Whoever is working on these things is great. I enjoy these so much. I wish I had a better quality copy of this particular book, because mine's beat up. The copy that I got has like the corner eaten off down here. I don't know if like a dog got their teeth on this or something, or if it's just like water damage or something. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you, man, Little Comic Shop of Horrors is one of the best Goosebumps books I've ever read in my life. Doesn't matter if you want the humor or the scares. The scares aren't as prominent as the parody and humor aspects. But man, it's great. It is such a fun adventure book. Again, you don't get adventures like this typically outside of the Give Yourself Goosebumps books. You just don't. I'm sorry, but you don't. The closest you come are things like Deep Trouble. But when you want the real wild, wacky types of stories, the closest you get to something like this is Attack of the Mutant. And that's a great story, too. I totally recommend that if you haven't read that before. One of the best Goosebumps books ever, easily. But for right now, Give Yourself Goosebumps number 17, Little Comic Shop of Horrors. If you haven't read this, I could not recommend it enough to you. If you haven't read a Give Yourself Goosebumps a book before, and you haven't heard of these before, I recommend this as your first. This is such a good book. I'm really kind of bummed too at the same time though. I haven't read a ton of these. I've only read, like I said, this is my 8th one. And I'm curious about whether any of them will ever top this for me. I mean, there are the suspects, like, for example, at Halloween time I'm planning on, God willing, reading Trick or Trapped, the original book from the Give Yourself Goosebumps series. And I don't know if I'm going to love that as much as something like this. I mean, I'm sure that's going to be fun and satisfying and everything. But I don't think anything could top this one for me. I mean, nothing comes close, as far as I can think off the top of my head, to topple something as good as Escape from Camp Run for Your Life, the number 19 book in this series. But this is fantastic. This might very well be one of my favorite Goosebumps books ever, like in my top 10. I know I say that pretty frequently, but as I read more Goosebumps, and there are books like this that I have an interest in, and then I pick it up and it totally shocks me, like how much of a clever writer is behind this, R.L. Stine or otherwise, it doesn't matter to me, like I said. But this is just amazing. It is such a fun, great read. It is such a breath of fresh air too after something like the Monster Blood books I've been reading off and on for so long. Great book. If you haven't read this, I couldn't recommend it enough to you. If I had to rate Little Comic Shop of Horrors on a 5-star basis, I would easily give this a 5 out of 5. Is there any question after the wonderfully positive review I just gave it? This was so great. Everything about it was great. I love the art too. I wish I didn't have this ugly library thrift books sticker thing on the front of it. But yeah, this was great. And one of the coolest things about this too, for my copy at least, is that I've never been to the bookstore that used to exist called Borders. Apparently this came from Borders. Somebody had it and then, I bought it off the internet and got it. I really wish I had a better looking copy though. This is too good to have a really beat up copy. I might very well buy another copy of this at some point. I don't know for sure, but God willing I'm allowed to have the money one day, I might go ahead and grab it. Honestly, it is such a great book. I adore this. Anyway, what are your thoughts on Little Comic Shop of Horrors, guys? Put your thoughts and comments down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about the Give Yourself Goosebumps books, about this particular book, about my review, whatever you have to say, guys. I'd love to hear it. Thank you for watching. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.